Coming up on the W Show, we put the match review under the spotlight. We unpack what went wrong for the Lions and can they stop Melbourne skipper Kate Hore. Plus, one of our OGs, Bulldog star Ellie Blackburn, joins us on the panel. You're watching the W Show thanks to NAB. Great to have your company. We have a massive show ahead. Award-winning journalist Sarah Black is here. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Nat. It's great to have some footy to talk about after such a long off-season.
So much footy, and there's plenty more to come. And one of our favourites here on the W Show, Ellie Blackburn from the Western Bulldogs. Great to see you.
Great to see you both, Nat and Sarah. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, let's get straight into it because we've got plenty to unpack, and we're going to take a look at what has been happening in the world of news this week when it comes to AFLW. And Collingwood is going to be without Tani White for the next 3 weeks, Sarah, because her tribunal, or they went to the tribunal last night, and her 3-game ban for a late bump on Maddie Collier was upheld. 3 games is a quarter of the W season, 1/8 when you look at the men's game. I feel like there's a bit of a disparity there.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, Nat, because if you want to ratio it against the men's, then you end up in difficult territory when you go, well, what does one match in the men's become? Is that a reprimand? You know, things get a little bit difficult. There's no easy answer to this. Tani's going to be a big loss for the Pies. I feel like they need to get some wins on the board early.
Ellie, do you think they need to sort of rejig things a little bit, and should we have a separate MRO matrix for the AFLW?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to have the same one as the men's, purely based on the length of both competitions. They're very separate in terms of, you know, how many games are played. So I think there's a potential to review it and have a separate one for the time being. But I mean, it's difficult and it's up to their hands when making those decisions.
I mean, when it comes to fines, we know that it's pro rata, so it's not as much as the men. Did you think Tani got her high as well? I thought it was more shoulder to shoulder, but as we know now, if you bump, it's the outcome, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it is based on the outcome. And personally, I had a look at it and looked at it in slow-mo as well, and it looked like the bump itself, the shoulders connected below the head, but it looked like both heads had clashed. And it's a tough one. If you elect to bump, unfortunately, these are the repercussions of it right now, and that was the decision that Tani made throughout the course of the game.
Some big news on the injury front when it comes to one of Essendon's co-captains in Bonnie Toogood, out for the next 6 to 8 weeks with this MCL injury after a huge collision with Amber Clark, who's going to miss with concussion. And that one, just, you could feel that if you're at the ground through your bones. You used to play alongside Bonnie. How much of a blow is this, Ellie, for the Essendon Football Club?
Yeah, I think as a forward presence, naturally it's a big loss for Essendon. She's obviously their reigning best and fairest winner from last season, has kicked a lot of goals for them. So that in itself is a massive loss. But I think it's the on-field leadership that you lose a lot of, which is really important for Essendon. I mean, they're still in year 3 of their development and their existence in the AFLW. So to lose such an experienced player for their on-field leadership is a big loss for Essendon.
What does Natalie Wood do with the magnet, Sarah? How do they cover her loss?
They're going to have to do a little bit of shuffling, Nat, because not only are they without Bonnie, they're also without Brooke Brown in defence for another 2 months. You know, and Elise Gamble was also suspended for a week, so that's another key defender out. So they're struggling for tools. Emily Goff has come into the team. She can play either end of the field. She's a draftee though, so a lot of pressure on her. I think they'll need to see more from Sophie Alexander. Matilda Dyke and Steph Wales are their rucks, so you know you could stick one of them in the square. Daria Bannister's such an important player. You've played alongside her, but the Bombers love the connection that she brings, Ellie, across half forward.
Yeah, and she's a great player to talk about as well, Sarah, because she is one of those great connection players. She's really influential on the field. Is a real impact player as well, so they'll be looking at the likes of herself to step up. And you know they've got some really experienced leaders in Steph Kane and Maddie Prasparkas in that field, in that team as well. That they'll be leaning on for that on-field experience and leadership.
Sticking with injuries, but from a Melbourne perspective, and Taylor Harris won't be facing the Lions this weekend, sidelined with that shoulder issue. Ellie, how much of a blow is this for the Ds?
Oh, it's a big blow because we know how impactful Taylor can be on the field and her presence in the forward line, but then her ability to rotate through the ruck as well. And she's such a hard matchup for competing rucks. You never know what you're going to get from Taylor sometimes coming out into the field. So I think for Melbourne, losing that presence and losing such a big target is a big loss for them.
At the weekend, Sarah, smart footies were unleashed in the AFLW. We had a couple of score assists to kick things off. What's the next step though for, I guess, the smart footy technology? Because it seemed to work pretty well for the most part.
Yeah, so 2 incidents, one in the Eagles-Richmond game and another down in Frankston, Nat, with your Hawks taking on Carlton, that needed a little bit of clarification from the umpires. So that was the way it went, rather than the arc. We need another word for the arc. It's not the arc. Yes, the score review taking over and going, actually, no, that wasn't quite right. The one thing we found as viewers and as people at the ground is that there's a bit of confusion as to what's actually going on when that happens, Ellie. We just saw umpires standing there, with their going, oh, yes, yes. So maybe we just need some graphics there just to tidy things up. But it's wrapping paper.
Yeah, it is, and I think they'll tidy up that system. It's obviously the first time utilising it, which is great for the AFLW that we have that system in place. It'll be nice to see it tidied up and pleasant viewing for the people at home as well.
Now, the last item on our agenda when it comes to news, Ellie, your football club is playing in a double header at the MCG come Friday night, which is super exciting. So you're playing Port Adelaide, and that's before the men face off against Hawthorn. You've played at the G before, but I'm guessing most of your teammates haven't.
No, I don't think many of them have. I think a couple of girls were mentioning last night that they did in Auskick days, that they played at half-time of the men's games when they were doing Auskick. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to play in the G throughout the exhibition game. So I'm really looking forward to the game. 4:30 start time, which is a little bit earlier than what it previously was in the fixture at Whitten Oval. But I mean, it's amazing for us that we get the opportunity to play on the G in a double header, which is a massive day for our football club as a whole.
And it's also a really big ground, Ellie. Like, I know Whitten Oval's quite wide, but how does the MCG stack up for you?
Oh, I mean, it's massive, isn't it? You're going to be covering a lot of Ks on the ground. It's going to be a very different feel and look in comparison to what we know for AFLW grounds and the running capacity that you'll have on those venues. So it'll be a different look for our young team. But we're really looking forward to it. It's really exciting. Not many opportunities arise to play on the hallowed turf of the MCG, so we're looking forward to it.
Very much looking forward to seeing the girls run out there on Friday night. Just want to take you back to the weekend, which you might not want to do too much.
Thanks,
but
Nat.
a tough loss to start the season, a 10-goal loss to the Giants, who aren't normally a high-scoring side. Where do you start, I guess, the review process when it is such a big loss to start the year?
Yeah, it's obviously a really difficult one to start off with, and for us, it's not necessarily going to be about wins and losses. I mean, you want to win games,
yes,
by all means, but we're very young and we're looking to educate our girls in a different way this season, and with a whole new coaching lineup, a third of our playing list has turned over, so we're not going to get it right to start off with, and we want to build on that, and we want to be able to generate some wins. So this weekend is a really great opportunity for us to play against Port Adelaide on a Friday night at the MCG to get our first win of the season, which we're very keen on winning, trust me. But it's about finding consistencies in our game and building on the things that we've been working on over the off-season.
And one thing, Ellie, that, unfortunately, if things aren't going to plan on the field, sometimes frustrations can boil over. And we saw a few incidents on the weekend that may have blown out that margin a little bit further than it needed to be. You're a senior leader at the club, we're seeing Georgia Stathis here, who's very experienced also. What do you say to help try and settle things down in the moment when things aren't going to plan?
Yeah, it's a tough one in these moments because you look at the scoreline and it's really frustrating. You never want to start the season off this way, and there's a couple of moments in lapse in concentration for us, I would say, and they're things we need to address a little bit more as a team, and we've definitely spoken about them already as a group, and being a bit more disciplined on the field in those moments rather than allowing the frustration to get the better of us. That's probably where we need to check in with each other a little bit more and make sure that we're remaining a bit more level-headed out in the field.
Well, I want to check in with you because last week on the W show, one of your former assistant coaches in Kate McCarthy was on, and she said that you deserved a little bit more respect from the club when it came to the captaincy changeover. I want to check in. How have the last couple of months been for you? Because I can't imagine it's been easy.
Yeah, it's obviously been quite a challenging process in a way, handing over the reins. Deanna's been amazing with it, though, I will say. She's incredible. She's a great leader. She's a wonderful human being, and her and I have a great connection. So that transition itself has been relatively seamless. I think it's probably more so for me adjusting to what the role looks like and what my role within the team looks like, and transitioning from sort of being that person that has probably the predominant voice, a bigger voice amongst the group, and allowing Deanna the space to have her say and have her voice heard from the playing group. So it's sort of been a slight adjustment from me. But, I've enjoyed being able to play that mentor role, particularly with Dee and some of the other leaders that have been able to step up in the likes of Izzy Pritchard and Izzy Grant and Jess Fitzgerald.
I mean, last year was such a tough year for you to lead the club, and sometimes it just looked like you were putting the team on your back and trying to bring them across the line. I'm sure it took an emotional toll. Does not having the captaincy, I guess, in some ways unburden you a little bit and free you up to be able to focus on your own game and maybe just get back to enjoying footy again?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we're one game in, so it's obviously the weekend was difficult, and I probably played a bit of a supporting role to Dee and the wider group as much as possible. After the loss, but I think as the season goes on, it potentially does allow me the opportunity to take a step back and not be so involved in it. I think last year I was very involved in each outcome that presented itself throughout the course of the season, and it took a real emotional and mental toll on me, I would say. So allowing myself to take a step back and just be a footballer and not having to worry about the captaincy title might be a nice opportunity for me to play a bit more freer football. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the season evolves for me personally in that aspect. But I'm not too sure. I don't think I'll be able to fully step away. No. I mean, I love the club and I love being able to support the players as much as possible. So, it's hard for me to pull away from that role.
But it's been able to lead in different ways, isn't it? Because you can lead through your actions on the field, which you've always done as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's an opportunity for the others to step up, like when behind our four walls, I would say. But on field, I'm going to keep being myself and keep trying to lead and play the football that I would naturally play. And it's something that I don't think, regardless of a title, you can take that away from me.
Hopefully we'll have a few more Who Else But Ellie B moments in the future, Elle. One more, you're nearly through the dog segment, you're doing well. But you've got a new coach amongst a myriad of changes this year, Tam Haughton. Now, obviously coaches work in different ways. How is Tam different from what you've had in the past?
Yeah, I think it's her coming in and what I've seen Tam be able to do is connect a lot with the other coaches and allow them the space to probably show themselves a little bit more. I don't think she feels like she has to be the voice the whole time and be the one, barking instructions as such at us. So I think she allows the freedom for the other coaches to step up a little bit more, which is quite nice because she is still very early in her development as a head coach. That it was her first game as a head coach at the AFLW on the weekend. So she's still learning just as much as our team is moving through it. But, she's great at building relationships with people. She's great at being able to, present a new game plan and game style and educate us on and off the field. So, which has been a nice addition to have this year.
Okay, we're going to let you off the hook now. And we do appreciate it because I know it's really tough fronting up with everything that's gone on. So we always appreciate your honesty. It's time now, though, for NAB Star Power. And this week it's all about the power of Daisy Pearce. Sarah, the first win for the Eagles under their new coach by the narrowest of margins. And you talked about the Daisy factor on Credit to the Girls podcast. It's an intangible that can't be underestimated.
Certainly not. This is from one new coach in Tam to another in Daisy who's had a vastly different experience. We're just seeing a lot of happy faces at the Eagles. I think it's made a world of difference. Sometimes you just need a fresh face in there. You speak to the girls and they're really loving their time in the environment. And we're also seeing some natural progression. We love Daisy, but also there's been a whole lot of hard work being put in by the girls as well. So Ella Roberts was outstanding on the weekend. Charlie Thomas is already an All-Australian, but names like Beth Schilling and the like, these younger Eagles, are seemingly really empowered to play their best footy.
Well, we are lucky enough on the W Show to have one of the best analysts in the business with us. It's Gemma Bastiani. It's time now for her deep dive. Ellie Blackburn has joined her over there. And Gemma, we're sticking with the Eagles.
We've spoken a lot about the intangibles when it comes to the West Coast Eagles and the Daisy effect. But Ellie, today we're going to talk about the actual tangible strategic evolution of this side. Can we talk a little bit about the backline, even though it was very inexperienced on the weekend?
Yeah, it is a very inexperienced backline. I mean, some debutants playing on the weekend held up extremely well against an experienced Richmond forward line, particularly with the likes of a Katie Brennan down there, which they did an exceptional job against.
Now, you said before we jumped on camera that it's a very daisy way to play. We've got some highlights of that backline. What is it about this team that looks very daisy-like to you?
Well, I think their ball movement to start off with is very daisy-like, the way that they're looking for those short kicks, trying to control the footy. But I think in defence as well is what they're trying to do is something that we've seen from Daisy, being able to get numbers back in support, take intercept marks and then get control of the game moving forward.
There was a move that we've seen Daisy actually be the person to do back at Melbourne, which is go behind the ball as a forward late in quarters. Amy Franklin was doing that on the weekend, but it was just the support that each of those young players were able to do. And then Charlie Thomas, defender, able to actually set up the match-winning goal to Kelly Gibson. So some really important roles from some young players there, working as a unit rather than as individuals.
Yeah, it was, and that's what it looked like, is that they were working as a team and as a collective. They weren't working individually, it was all coming together as one. They were able to do a really important team defence against a really solid Richmond attack line and able to get numbers back in support. They were able to number off quite well and then transition the ball really effectively forward of the footy. And able to score off it.
We've got a really good example of that, defending the full ground transition here. So Richmond are coming out of the back line. Typically against West Coast, we see a lot of teams go end to end against them. But look at these numbers that are actually getting back ahead of their Richmond opponents to populate that defence. Comes forward, Monconti, one of the best users in the game. She's forced to go a little bit wide. And from here, take us away, Ellie. What did the Eagles do?
Well, they're able to get numbers back in defence. So firstly, they were able to number off, and then their extra players that we saw transition defensively are able to impact this play in transition. So they're able to get their hands on the footy and then look for that short kick, which is something that Daisy did a lot of in her time of playing. She was able to get really good control of the footy and find a target and slow things down, which they were able to do.
And this weekend, the Bombers have to try to take them on at Mineral Resources Park without Bonnie Toogood. Can West Coast win a second game in a row?
I think they can win a second game in a row, Jem. I think they're really primed for it. If they play like they did on the weekend, I think they're a red-hot crack for this weekend's game.
I'm tipping the Eagles as well.
Ooh, juicy. I like it. As we take a look at the week 2 fixtures, Ellie makes her way back to the couch. Sarah, there are some juicy games coming our way. That one for sure. The Saints game is the other one I'm curious about. But North Melbourne and Geelong has piqued my interest.
Yes, shout out to Fremantle and Adelaide too. I reckon that one will be really
There's
good. There's so many to choose from. But North Melbourne and Geelong have had a really tough start to the year, as have the Roos actually. The Roos just blew Brisbane off the park. So Geelong have a big task ahead. They're going to need to pinch one of these wins against the top 4 sides if they want to make top 4 at the end of the year.
Well, the match of the round has to be down at KC Fields. It's Melbourne and the Brisbane Lions. Can the Lions bounce back after that loss to the Roos? But more importantly, Ellie, can they stop Kate Hoare, who was on fire on the weekend, and she basically kept them in that game against the Cats?
Yeah, I mean, she's incredible, isn't she? We've known what she's been able to do over the last couple of seasons now, and the weekend was no different for her. The 23 disposals and the few goals and 7 clearances, mind you, to her name. She probably doesn't even need that many touches in a game. She's just so impactful with everything she does on the field, and she's such a hard matchup as well, Sarah. Her ability to come to the contest, have an impact as a clearance player, but then like her running ability is incredible. So she pushes hard forward, and it's really tough to match up against, and she's able to score as a result of that. So potentially a Bree Conan matchup. We've seen Bree Conan come into the midfield and play a bit of a tagging role for Brisbane of recent times. So maybe that's something that she could look to do on the weekend.
Yeah, covering this game, where she really stood apart was her cleanliness and agility in quite tough conditions. It was super windy down in Geelong and quite slippery. So, she might have Conan covered for agility as well. So, Craig Starcevich has got a few headaches there, Nat.
He certainly does. Melbourne coach Mick Stanier was asked about Kate Hoare and I guess how best to utilise her.
Yeah, I think if we're winning territory and getting the ball forward, then it's nice to have Kate forward. But if we're sort of losing momentum in there, the ability to then be able to throw her in there and change the momentum of the game.
So what about the reigning premier in Brisbane? Because they went down to North Melbourne, 44 points, which is their biggest losing margin, also the highest score they've ever conceded. What did you see, Sarah, that concerned you most?
This was quite an extraordinary match. I was
Yeah,
sitting
it
back
was.
on the couch going, what is going
Especially
on?
in 34-degree heat.
Yeah, that was the part that really threw me. Coming into this game, we thought that Brisbane, they're such a fit and strong team, and they're trainer in not quite 34 heat, but, much bigger than Melbourne. But North Melbourne's running power was absolutely incredible. They ran the lines off their toes. If you, see some of the highlights from the game, what you will see is waves and waves of North Melbourne players. They're running, their overlap run was extraordinary. They just completely lost their opponents in transition, and they always had another one to kick to forward. It wasn't the talls doing the damage in this game, it was the smalls. Bella Eddy, Alice O'Loughlin, who is unfortunately suspended, coming up. But yeah, the Roos have got so many weapons.
They certainly do. How do Melbourne beat the Lions?
Well, I mean, it's a
million-dollar question.
It's a really tough one. I mean, and you talk to their running patterns and their running capacity. I think it's being mindful of the way that they run as well. They're really smart with it, so they don't all get sucked into the footy. They hold their shape really nicely around the ball. They trust that someone's going to win the ball on the inside and be able to exit it quite cleanly to someone on the outside. So I think for Melbourne, not getting too sucked into the contest, allowing themselves to beat them one-on-one around the ground, and the likes of Kate Hoare having another great game.
So we spoke about Kate Hoare, but she could be the least of Craig Starcevich's problems. Let's take a listen to the Lions coach after the loss to the Roos.
The third quarter we were really showing up, and that made the result the blowout that it was. But the rest of the game, we've got to somehow take some sort of solace from bits and pieces that were okay, but we're way off where we need to be. And you can't have an opposition just piling on 5 or 6 goals in a quarter because it's too hard in this comp.
So that was Craig Starcevich. Ellie, you've come up against Brisbane so many times. Would you be a little bit worried if you were Melbourne, knowing the way that they can respond after a heavy loss like that?
Oh, absolutely. We definitely know what Brisbane's capable of, and the likes of their big names really stepping up in those moments. I mean, Dakota Davidson can be one of those players to really set it alight. And we know always out at Casey Fields, there's always an interesting game that pops up.
Yes.
So this weekend could be anything. But I mean, it's an exciting game for the weekend, and especially in round 2 of AFLW.
Time now for a new segment on the W Show. It's the hot seat. And Ellie, you thought you were already in the hot seat earlier in the show, but we're going to go again.
There's more.
There's more. 60 seconds on the clock. Let's go. If you could poach one player from another team, who are you taking?
Jasmine Garner.
Favourite Tay-Tay era?
Reputation.
If you are what you eat, what are you?
The Pancake Parlour.
Who is the best to ever play the game?
Well, I'm a St Kilda supporter growing up, so Robert Harvey for me.
Which teammate loads up the most on free food in the airport lounge?
Ellie Gavalis, maybe.
Oh, wow. 4 runs of bus already.
I love
Teammate
that.
for 2 minutes.
Do you wish you were taller?
Absolutely, I do.
I think all 3 of us can answer yes to that. Who's your current celebrity crush?
I mean, probably like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, both of them.
Okay, together. Who wins the BNF this year?
Hopefully Jasmine Garner finally gets one.
Finally. At what age do you officially become old?
Well, I mean, according to my teammates, about 10 years ago, but to me right now, I don't know, ages away.
Yeah, good. When was the last time you Googled yourself?
Oh, good question.
Yesterday.
Honestly.
Yeah, this morning.
The fact you're having to think about that.
It was this morning, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't this morning, but probably in the last week, yeah.
I absolutely love it. That is it for the W Show. Ellie, thank you so much for coming in. Again, thank you for your honesty and being here, and good luck at the MCG against the Power in that double header.
Thank you. Very excited for the game on Friday night.
Sarah, love your work as always.
Love your work now.
That is it for the W Show. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
Want to get all the latest footy news in one hit? From injuries to breaking news, the latest from the coaches, the Footy Feed team has you covered. Watch it now on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app, or wherever you get your podcasts.